This is another episode of In the Room with Gavin and George. We're again finding that we're exploring some interesting stuff. We've been looking over the last few days at uh, our our exploits with film festivals and what's happening, and also with bits and pieces to do with artwork, and storyboarding and storytelling, and the difficulties that people have been having in the industry, which we've also experienced over the last few years in one form or fashion. So that's really what we're going to be talking about, I think, today, because it's just on our minds, and I think that's where we should really start. I mean, Garvin, you said that this last week all the wood has appeared for the artwork that you were talking about, and which we were going to base on the story boards for the next film. Tell us a little bit about, just give us a bit of background behind why you suddenly decided to go off and get all that wood for 52 images.
No, I didn't suddenly decide. This is the strangest thing ever. It's 5 years in the making. At the very least, I was having conversations about 5 years ago about, I want to do something. No, I'm using the word I because there was no we at that point in time. It was pre-George. And I was going, I want to do, it was the actual start of the 52 Jokers Wild concept. I was going, 52 Jokers Wild, these big, I want to do something large at scale, but of a controllable scale for me, based on maybe limited budgets and resources. So I was saying at that time, 10-foot high paintings, and it's going to be about manga. Manga, anime, something. I didn't even know what the words meant. I was just going, it's to annoy my sisters. If I thought about my father was an artist, my sisters are fine artists. And I was going, I believe now, and I know now, there has been an artist in me for a long, long time. And this was probably the first real expression of it, whereby if I'm going to become it, it has to be go large. It has to be do it big. It has to be very, very uncomfortable. And it was really to hold yourself accountable at a size of something. It was not go there by baby steps and do a little something that you nearly, if you failed, you fell back. So I was saying, it's got to be 10 foot high. Actually, it's got to be 50 of them, 52 of them. Feck it. It's going to be 52, 10 foot high somethings. And what the subject is I love manga. I don't even know if I like manga. What was coming in all my streams in front of me of this at that time was anime, manga, the language. It was color. It was this flat color caricature, something maybe I could draw a color in, sketch by numbers. It wasn't fine art, Michelangelo, Leonardo. It was something I could attempt, color by numbers, but large. And therefore, but where, and actually over the last number of years, they start to appear. I've got 6 foot by 6 foot paintings at the back. Behind me here is 6 foot by 3 foot paintings. But what they are, I didn't do them. My sister did them. Actually, the other 6 foot by 6 foots, one of our colleagues, Willie Watson, an artist, did them. But they were of our story of 52 Jokers Wild, the first iteration. Now I'm saying that is still not these 52 somethings. And I keep on talking about it. I've been talking about it for years. And I don't even know what it is. And George said, we've to stop talking about stuff. We've got to start doing. And that's what's happened in the last few weeks. I'm going to hold myself more accountable in the do space. And therefore I was saying, what's the first iteration of the doing? It was to buy the materials for that exact amount that will give me 52 7 foot by 4 foot canvases, that when we basically move the process from buying to assembly, there's no more avoiding the elephant in the room of 52 7 foot high blank spaces crying out to be filled with whatever stories we're talking about. And that's now the journey of storyboarding the 52. I'll assemble, and we're now talking the language of what story and journeys are we now going to parallel run with these.
I think the great thing about the form of artwork that you're talking about, compared to individuals working on it separately and not necessarily knowing where they're going. And again, my form of artwork in the past used to be a ballpoint pen and just doing very, very small little things. But I like this idea of blowing them up into something really, really big. But also, it's the fact that you're talking about it's 5 years since that initial idea came, pre me sort of coming down and talking to you. And there's been an energy of wanting to do something that I think you've had in those 5 years. You want to do, you want to be actually doing this stuff. And even with that story that you told about going out with your son to work on the set of a film and suddenly started to realize that you could do that. And I think we've collectively, it's not that we've not been doing anything. We've got 130 odd shows in the room. We've got now 2 short films, of which you've written one of them. You've also written now a feature film, which you didn't even conceive that you'd be able to do, and you were worried about whether you could create a story, but you've created a really good story, which in its own right is a feature film in one direction, but is a novella or something else in another direction. It's almost there for both those different avenues that it can go down. So we've been constantly doing, and it's been generating more and more ideas. So I think the more we've been practicing, which is what the key word I think is, practice, the more solid those ideas are suddenly started to shape up into, and you can start to realize them. You're in 3D, you use the word rendering. We're actually going to be rendering in 3D these objects that we've had in our head for quite some time. And I think that's quite exciting from my perspective, because I've always been drawing and painting and doing other little bits and pieces. It's been part of my everyday work, but it's been used for something else. And there's a nice idea of turning storyboards that I might generate as a thumbnail into something a bit more, comprehensive to go up on your 7x4 panels. And there's something that's quite interesting, because you just had a conversation with me about your initial 10 by whatever size, but there were practical reasons why you suddenly changed the size. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, again, it's back to you want the story to be large. So my language in the very, very early days was 10 foot high, because I think I was living in a room that the ceilings are only about 7-8 foot high, normal general public. Now I've suddenly in that timeline have a bigger house that has higher ceilings. So 10 foot high in this house is like a normal, 4 foot something in a different size house. But I wanted something of scale and size that you immediately change the customer based on. It was a hotel foyer, a factory floor, an office space. It wasn't something to hide in plain sight in a small room. The story needs to be at scale. The image needs to be at scale. It's go large or go home. Now, 10 foot, I suddenly realized now I'm 6'6", I'm large. The door I walk through at the most in this house is good. It might be 7 foot. I don't have to bend my head. And but as soon as I went beyond the 7 foot, you're starting to do logistics and engineering to move things in and out of vans, get it in and out of doors, hang it in rooms that the ceiling is actually lower, and it then actually cuts out an awful lot of choice. Now, sometimes you're cutting out the choice that maybe can't afford it and sees that price as being a big price because it's a small room. Whereas in big rooms, you need big things to fill big spaces and have big ideas, and it has to be nearly a big price. So I was trying to give this subliminal association of size with value. If I'm not an expert or have a known name of something, I can draw something small and charge 10 grand. What the 10 foot was nearly the secondary language, and that was 10 foot high, 10 grand. I want to be high value, low volume, and go large. And that was my language. Before I even know what the subject was that's on these, it had to be at a certain size of scale, not a volume of scale. And it had to be of a value that it was your first pass is it's big and must cost a lot. And then people are getting used to the language already. Look at the size of that thing. It's 10 grand. It's nothing small. It's going to be in a grand room. And therefore, your curtains will cost that in that room. So I was trying to formulate my customers before even knowing what the product was, but it's to align those two things. But then I realized I can't even get the materials here. I had great fun with a crane out the back, just getting the pallet of MDF boards over a roof to come in the front door. And these are the smaller 8-foot versions. So there was magic numbers learned in the meantime, which actually then became 7 foot high and not 5 foot wide, 4 foot wide, and 7x4 was 28. And there's some golden numbery rule going on there that portraiture wise, is actually better than an 8x4 because it's two squares. That's two squares. It's rectangle. It's not quite. Portraiture doesn't mean rectangle necessarily, and therefore there was a hidden number in there that the right. Actually, even in our last one of our films, ND Near Death, I have an artist friend, Sid Evans, that hung paintings as part of our background in that film, and here is 5 7-foot by 4-foot paintings, and the answer presented itself. The guy that's going to build them all out the back and assemble them is going to assemble 52 of what he already had and did before that presented itself to me in my own house to go, this is the correct scale. The number 52 is the right number, but this is now understandable to an artist that's going a little beyond their comfort zone to paint and draw. Any bigger, it gets too unwieldy to actually paint on. So it's a long and winded answer to the numbers arriving back at themselves, presented by artists and filmmakers on a journey that's helping me better tell the story and make real what my original vision was. So it's not the 52, they're templates of an installation of blanks that can have many stories going forward. And that's what I'm excited to see what stories are going to be told within this installation space.
Well, there's an interesting idea suddenly came to mind as you were talking about that. And because we did show the other work in ND, and it became a feature thing, that you could almost see these films that we make suddenly showing glimpses of the artwork. Because even when we were just doing a little bit of research there, we were suddenly looking at film art and what that encompassed. And you know, if our art is within our film and it's actually physically in our film as well as the art of the creation of the film, because one of the things we were talking about was whether to do landscape or portrait. Now the storyboards, because we're shooting video, digital video, will be in landscape mode. But all of a sudden there's a creative aspect that we suddenly started to talk about, because we'll probably do the art that it suits better in portrait. And then it creates out of the storyboard, although it's in one format, a new art form comes out, which will work well within the installations that you're talking about there, which I think is wonderful. And we were also looking at the kind of style of art that we want to do, because we don't want complicated. Because we're restricting ourselves. Yeah, it's pop art. It's a bit more like, it's a bit like Marilyn Monroe that was done by Andy Warhol or Elvis Presley.
I love it. I'm going to stop you there for a second, because I only said that sentence last week, that what's about to happen out the back is we need a process, an Andy Warhol factory process now to assemble this journey of 52, because the danger with the 52 and the scale we're talking is, if it's like my sisters and friends that are artists, it could be a year per one. Whereby, no, we've got to, at scale and speed with the process, deliver quality and quantity within a meaningful timeline, so it's understood. Otherwise, we could get lost in distraction for the years to come.
No, I think that's the important part, because one of the biggest problems is starting to get something done and finding a process. But that's an important part of our story, because we found a process within our filmmaking techniques and within even doing the podcast that we're now recording. It's all down to process, without overthinking, without laboring too much on it, but expressing ourselves in whatever means we find at hand. And even the act of going out and buying those canvases and assembling them and getting them ready is already setting in line one stream, which means another stream has to now be activated to meet the needs and demands of that 52 being produced, in exactly the same way we had with the films. Like, we have to set up our scripts, we have to break it down into its component parts so that we know how we're going to make each shot, each scene, which is why we're doing a storyboard. And if we apply that same process to the artwork, which also becomes marketing materials for effectively promoting those films, which also means that once we get the style of the artwork done, that could become our poster for that particular film, or one of the posters, or multiple posters. So that's something else that we can actually look at. And I think that's the ideal thing. But the process is really important, because everything you've done from the accountant perspective is all about how do you minimize everything so it becomes cost effective, becomes a reasonable process. Even when we looked at the artwork that was being done by that art gallery with the artists, when we went through it and saw what they were being asked to do, each one of those artists, to generate their money, is being asked to do a piece of artwork within a given time for a given particular price. And I think, when you look at what they're actually doing and the amount of time they're spending on it, you can virtually calculate why the price is as it is. I remember when I was a youngster, one of my uncles who worked in like an art or furniture place, antiques place, really expensive stuff. He was constantly telling me how I should price up my paintings based on the number of hours I'm doing and everything else. And because then I didn't have the business mind on me, I couldn't work out what he was talking about. But it made sense because all the things that he was suggesting that I did is what you're now talking about, producing this artwork. And it makes sense because to make it valuable, it's got to, it has to meet certain criteria. One, for generating an income for us, but also for the criteria for why some corporate might want to spend some money on this, which is what you were thinking about. You had this vision of a corporate who would be stationing these pieces of artwork throughout what could effectively be just white walls and very boring, to add a little bit of color and texture and something that they're not only their employees, but their investors, their stakeholders of any form or fashion going through their walls would suddenly see this artwork and have a little bit of thought. It's a place for reflection as well, because in a museum, you sit down and look at the artwork for a period of time. It gives you a chance to reflect on where you are. And that's an environment that you're actually creating. So not only are you creating these 52 7x4 items, you're visualizing where they could be seated or set, so that the audience that walks through them in a gallery or whatever has a certain sense of feel within that. And that's something we want to try and invoke within the film, in the way we produce the film of the same story. That could invoke the production design of that film. So again, it's adding more texture to everything we're currently doing.
Now, that's interesting because what I heard was a little bit of what we were talking about earlier on. Anyone I'm coming across now in the indie film space, the micro budget indie film space, predominantly writers and screenwriters, and I relate to them in a sense of the industry is changing. It's a very, very risky industry at a certain level, and particularly at the level of micro indie production or indie production, sub 5 million, sub 1 million, any amount of money that's not yours, that you've got to get from somebody else to invest in your story and making a script real into a production and a consumable product at the end of the day, you have to be selling an investment proposition. In the absence of that, it's philanthropic charity or it's grant. And there's so many people in the grant queue through corporations or councils or film bodies that, yes, somebody will get it, but 999 out of 1,000 won't. So therefore, that person got it. Next 999, where are you going to get it? How are you going to make your story real? If you're not going to you've spent your time, you've created a story, but if you're not the money, someone else is. And if someone else is, then you got to be selling to them, because they didn't ask you to do what you did. You've done it already. They didn't commission it. It could be the greatest story ever told. For them to know, they have to look, they have to see, they have to understand, they have to price, they have to value it, they have to cost it to understand the value of it. If there's a cost, to then see an ROI. So the first person to value it is you. And then you've got to then tell the story of the value to some unknown third party and make it that they value it. And that's probably what I was thinking with this. We've got to create a collection. And a collection, with the very nature of it, is it's collectible. And if it's collectible, there's a scarcity about it. It's investable. And if it's investable, there must be a perceived value. I don't know I'm hoping 10,000 like a painting. Someone else might say 10 quid. But if we're arguing between 10 and 10,000, there's a value there. 10 might be too low because it cost me 200 just for the wood. So therefore you're going, look, now I'm philanthropic giving it to you. But I take it back and go, there's a collectability. That's the like. I'm watching Netflix. I'm seeing the collectibles. I'm seeing these collectible cards, and the language I'm sort of hearing and seeing is, you've got to be selling scarcity. You've got to sell collectability, investability. No one even knows what the story is. They got to believe it's collectible, scarce, and investable for them to want to own it, because that's how they're perceiving themselves. They collect scarce things. They invest in things that go up in value. They invest in people. They invest in things. They invest their time. They invest their money. We don't even know who they are. We don't even know what the figure is, and it doesn't matter, because we have to align with them. Whoever you are, you've got to align your story with their story, your values with their values, what you're selling to what they're buying. And now I'm going, that's why I believe the 52 Jokers Wild is, it's 52 is something. I want 52 people or one big, large something else. And we're saying we're making it, if it's 52 small or something, it's got a it's consumable, affordable to 52 people versus one big somebody. But that's what we don't even, well, we know what's going to be on these as a first pass iteration. It's a story of visibility, of collectability, of scarcity, of being involved and being part of a journey that no one else can be. Because we're saying, when you have this one of 52, you are one of 52 that have it and the rest of the planet doesn't.
Yeah.
And you've helped us move from A to B, and you've valued what we value, and we valued enough of our time to give you a piece of it to go to the next level by saying, this is some of our life, this is some of our time. We spent it on this blank canvas, and we invest our time and energy, our most valuable thing, into it for you to own and journey with us as a collectible, and invest in us to go on the next part of our journey. But going back to the script writers and screenwriters and everyone else, if you can't sell the first iteration of something, do you go back in the drawer? And what we were trying to say is, we can't stay in drawers. We can't stay in queues. Our time is too valuable. We've got to come up with another iteration or another option in order to move forward and make it real. So we're coming back to, of our 152 podcasts, in there was things, make it real, go do, act on it. Value, if we don't value our time, no one else will. And so we're saying, we're not an NFT. We're not this software, digital something on a screen you can invest in. We're going to make it 7 foot high, make it real. We're both artists. We have skill sets, and we're going to go invest in this, and we will invest in the next part of the journey in others and make them real, actor, cast, crew, story. And if everybody invests, then we can keep on creating value, I think.
Well, I'm finding that's interesting about this whole process is that in some cases that what we're doing is not original, but I had a massive conversation with people about what originality is. But what it is innovative. We're innovating a way of doing something that, I mean, the filmmaking process has been going on for well over, about 125 years or more now, maybe longer than that. And the same methodology is what you use, regardless of whether it was, nitrate film that would have exploded on you if you hadn't handled it right in the early days, or whether it's digital now. The same process has to, you still have to write a story. You still have to get a load of people to collaborate together. You still have to then edit it together and market it. There's a whole process. But what a lot of filmmakers and art people feel is that they are different from every other kind of business. But the reality is, and what we're talking about here is, no, we're not. It's exactly the same as any other. And because there's formulas that can be put together to work those things out, you can apply those principles to what we're doing. Now, earlier on, before we started recording, we were talking about the problems that self-employed sole traders have who are normally freelancing within the industry. And I know that in the North, that over the last goodness knows how many years, if you were working for an individual and end up going onto their premises, you were classed as their employee. Even if it was a short-term contract, you were still an employee for a certain period of time. And if you weren't being allowed to use your own equipment, then you were basically under the instruction of somebody else. So this definition of self-employment is quite an issue. And I know there was my brother's been talking about this for years and years and years. And I know that I was under the same kind of thing, that subcontractors is basically what they were, being classed as not as self-employed. You're not working for yourself, and that's an anomaly in itself, because you're working to someone else's instructions, to somebody else's process. And where we're trying to change now is that where we're not working to another person's drumbeat, we're working to our own way of doing and achieving things. So again, from your perspective there, Garvin, the question is, tell us a little bit about the problems that people were having, especially if they're freelancing and trying to work for other people, compared to, being the showrunners is the way that you would have last, because we're now technically becoming showrunners. We have our own ideas, we have our own productions, we want to see them come to fruition. We know we're running out of time life-wise, because, at the stage we're at least 2/3 through our life, if we're lucky, if things don't end tomorrow, but, God willing, we will. But we want to, there's that sense of purpose. And I know that your story was such that although you'd worked as an employee, technically speaking, good salary, for a load of other people got the rewards, and they got the sense of achievement, which you had expressed to me that you hadn't. And I know when I was talking to the people that came to renovate our house, that they only saw their bit of work. They never saw the overall picture. So they never got a real sense of satisfaction. It was just a job. And in many ways, I know that editors, cameramen, designers, for most of them, it's just a job for a certain period of time within this slot. And once they've finished in that slot, they're out doing something else. They're daily jobbers. They're not the people that see the overall picture and see it come to fruition. So tell us a little bit about your concept of all that.
Now, I'm going to say you've just become me. If anyone wants to look at the last 140 shows, George, I asked a question about 3 sentences ago. I've nearly forgotten now. That was about freelancing and contracting. He's had a whole different conversation since then, and changed the question at the end to a total different question as about how I feel about something else, which was actually the question I wanted to answer when we started the whole process. Because what I realized from the last piece of what I was saying was, there's a weird anomaly of going, why are you going off and being an artist painting 52 paintings, then to go off and try and find 52 customers or X number of customers to get Y number of money to invest in a film, when I can go off and be an accountant and get much more than that, and actually just invest in the film we're done with and just have one customer. That's what I suddenly remembered afterwards. It's how I want to raise the finance doing what. I don't want to go off and get a job and get 100 grand and spend the next year being an accountant, exactly as you just said, being a subcontractor, being a consultant, or being an employee into a telco or pharmaceutical to do color in spreadsheets and go, I know exactly what I'll end up with. I'll have nosebleed hours there on the way back and to and from, and use every hour of the day up. And I will be a year from now, and I will have 6 figures of something. I will have it. And I know I can get it based on 30 years of what went before. But that will be the figure might be nice, but the year of consuming the most valuable resource I have left in my lifetime of time and energy and who I want to be will be the least value I'd associate with it beyond money. So therefore, that's what I heard in myself. I'm going, I've actually chose to become an artist, to paint art with my colleagues and friends and other yourself and others, and we're going to go on a journey of creating art and an installation of art and investments for others to do it this way. This is the process. It could be much harder. It is going to be harder. It's going to be much more difficult. I don't even know it's going to be successful. It may not even be successful. But even at this point in time, if when these paintings exist, and no matter what form or value to others, I already know that will be a year well spent. It will be there as a testament of time of legacy of, here is something I said I was going to do, and I did it, and we did it. And it will not be a spreadsheet on a folder in space, in virtual space of colored in Excel. That is the worst use of time I can now. That is why I now believe I'm an artist and not an accountant. I believe I need to have manifest and make real ideas and stories at a cost of personal time and others' time using certain materials and skills. This I'm looking forward to, the other I am not. I know the difference between the two is how do we make the most, profitable version of that, tax efficient version of that, that everyone's paid the right day rate. That's a whole other complexity that will actually probably prevent you doing most of the things in question. I'm looking forward to the art. I'm looking forward to being a creative. I'm not, and I'd like the word in there, and we are looking for in our process and journey is to make that journey sustainable and make it tax efficient by the end of it. And the freelancers, actually, strange thing is, we're talking about using that finance of a successful selling of that product to then interact with subcontractors, self-employees, and individuals in a way that we stay compliant. That's all.
Well, I think what's interesting is that when I started to learn how to be a filmmaker all those years ago, nearly 40 years ago or so, what you were being trained to do was to be collaborative and creative in the way that we've been over the last 5 years. And the 40 years that have gone between there and then, all I was doing was basically working as a slave for somebody else. They may have had a good wage coming in, but they felt that because they were paying for your time and they owned you for that time, that they could quite often treat you however they felt, which was unfair. And I know you've told stories of how, on the first day of one of your contracts a couple of years ago that you went off to do, you actually felt as though you were about to be fired, not because of what you were doing, but because of the attitude of the people you were working for. Which again is a sad sort of reflection of what the world has actually come into. That some people, because they think they want to lord it over you, and they basically want to make your life really, really bad. So one of the great things about what we've been doing over the last 5 years is this collaboration, this trying things out, this sorting things through, and being creative. I mean, that's what we've done in 5 years, to be able to do the volume of what we've done, and to visualize it in different ways. Because one of the great periods of time that we had in this journey was, and it turns out to be about 2 years ago now, was when we had six students working with us, and we gave them an opportunity to be so creative. We weren't basically restricting how they did things by micromanaging them. That was the word I was looking for, micromanaging them. We allowed them the flexibility to be creative within the time constraints of when they started in the morning, when they ended up in the evening. We wanted to see what they could do, what could they achieve, how creative could they be, and then to talk about it at the end. And it wasn't about criticizing and sort of jumping down their throats, which I know I've had experiences of in other types of jobs I've done within the creative field. It was actually building them up and giving them the confidence that what they'd done was really good, and we could show off that work to other people, and we're quite happy to do so. They felt as though they had ownership of what they were doing. And I think that's what we've found on this journey, is that, I know I hope you have had the same sense of ownership about what we're doing, that we're collaborating together. We're not being exploited. That's something that was really, really important, that we didn't feel as though we were being exploited by what we were doing. And because we were given that freedom, I know that I decided that I went off and did things that were way beyond what was expected of me, but I felt that I got the freedom to do that, and I didn't mind. I didn't feel as though I was being robbed of that. I felt I was being given the opportunity to explore ideas, especially from the music perspective, but also from the filmmaking perspective, to see what challenges I had, what was holding me back doing certain types of things. And the more and more we get to do this, the more and more confident we'll both become in the roles that we give ourselves at that particular point in time. And we'll swap those roles, because it's lovely to see you having written a feature film script and going through it now and getting enthused by what I'm reading to want to generate the images, both from a storyboard perspective and the filmmaking perspective. How do we solve those problems? And it's allowing us to use all those critical analysis faculties and the critical reviews, being critical in in the sense of critical thinking, how to solve those problems, which is lacking in a lot of what most people are getting a chance to do in their lives, which is why I think we wanted to do this in the first place, and what led you to this part of your journey, so that you can feel that there are goalposts that you've accomplished along the way within your journey. Because one of the things you expressed to me, and I was feeling the same way with some of the areas that I could have got into, was that no one would have noticed that you'd done certain things. You'd have been oblivious to the outside world. And I don't think that's our purpose. It's not to lord it over people, but it's to allow other people to be creative, so that they could feel that their time that they have in this world is valued. And quite often, money's not the best way of gauging that value. Sometimes it's something else. And I think we're beginning to find that in the journey that we're on.
No, that's very interesting, because when we were talking before we started this particular episode, we were wondering what we're going to talk about. And I was trying to think of a couple of things based on what conversation I was having during the week with others. And strangely enough, what came up, like as a saying, I think we had one of our earlier podcasts, is, am I the me I'm meant to be? Or the story of you was another way we looked at it and go, that's the language. Go, what's your story? What's your legacy? Are we who we're meant to be? I was even talking to my son Max there one time, going, I could be a famous downhill, sort of skier. I've never skied. I've never been to a snowy mountain with skis. I would never find out my reason, the raison d'etre or purpose to be on this planet was to be an Olympic skier. I just wasn't in the right place at the right time to find that out, my natural skill and ability. So everybody on this planet, I believe, has a purpose, and even a divine purpose of sorts, to go that they're a natural at. If we're going, and most people, if we're in a position to go out and search it out, we touched on this in other shows as well. Most people are deprived in the sense of they can't go further than the end of the road. They don't have a passport, can't leave the country. They don't have money, can't afford to explore and experiment. They have bills. They have to keep on doing the day job and the mundane because they can't escape the rat race. But if you took all that, actually Star Trek was when you went off into the future and money was no longer the issue and starvation was sorted and famine and pestilence and plague and all the rest. What you were left with was the exploration to find out your purpose and maybe explore new beings, new life, new universes, and go out and find yourself and others. And that's what's really happened in the last number of years. Again, it's like from meeting George, it's like finding new friends, new people, new ideas, and trying new things. I'm more the person I'm meant to be now than I've been ever before this, I believe. I think I have always been a creative and always avoided the fact that I am. I think in pictures and talk, but made myself talk in numbers in terms of a career. Made no sense, absolutely. I went to interviews where I interviewed to be an accountant, and they told me in the interview, you didn't get that. Did you not think of applying for sales or marketing, given you're more of a people person? So I sort of knew I didn't get the job. But at the same time, the world was trying to tell me, you're meant to be talking, you're meant to be meeting, you're meant to be greeting, you're meant to be selling, because you have no fear to break the ice. If I knew what I was talking about, that might be a different story. Actually, most of the time I don't want to know what I'm talking about, because that becomes rota. That becomes the parameter of that was what I didn't want to do in sales. This is the product, that's the price, these are the features, here you go, do it again, next. That's a nothing to me. I want to basically explore possibilities and conversations and make ideas real. That's the me I want to be. And I now think, as a creative and working with like-minded creatives, it's to stop the talking aspect. The bit before I never did was I had the ideas, I had the talk, and I never went off and did it. Other people listened and they went off, became multimillionaires. Now it's not that I want the money aspect. It's now go make it real. That's every time I talk to a script writer and going, do 1 minute of it. Do the short, not the feature. Don't build an impossibility that will actually prevent it ever becoming real without someone's philanthropy or someone else's donation or someone else's investment. Because if you depend on someone else to make you real, then there's a danger you never will be. So I've realized I've got X number of years left the runway. That was an episode a few episodes ago. There's a short runway left. And if you want to be who you want to be, or try and find out who that is, you've got to go out there, talk the talk, walk the walk, make it real. And the it in question is yourself, I believe.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's interesting that when you were talking there, I began to sort of think about how most of us, when we're kids, when we're 4 or 5 year olds, anything's possible. We just don't know how to do it just at that point. But if we get a mindset, we will do everything and anything. My 3-year-old granddaughter says, "I'm going to be an artist when I grow up." And everyone went, "But you're an artist now."
That's it.
You're an artist now. You're doing what you want to do now. And my grandson's playing the piano, and he's doing what he wants to do it, and he gets bored with being, controlled because they have to do it the proper way. But most of us end up doing the jobs that we end up with because we're frightened that if we don't, we won't be able to have what other people expect us, their expectations of what our life should be. And because we fall into that way of working, we quite often are robbed of the full potential that we have. And I think that, and again, that's a loss to what could be there for the world. It isn't about money. It's about the way we lead our lives to help other people. And that's what we're doing now. The benefits will come. They're just an after thing. They will come. They'll allow us to do what we need to do. But the issue is that if we get stuck into somebody else's way of doing, we then become a slave to the way you generate an income. And I get the impression that the more money you earn, the more of a slave you become, because you become more and more restricted. You become more and more fearful of what the disasters could be. Whereas I think if we're working the way we are, we can accommodate the small problems that occur because we realize they will occur. They're going to happen. That's actually the tapestry of life. That's what makes things enjoyable. That's what makes things exciting, because it's not knowing what might happen, trying things out and seeing how other things try to derail you, but still managing to get through because you can accommodate those problems. But having that joy of being able to solve problems the way you'd like to, and allowing the intellect that you've been given to work things out from different perspectives, because you and I are not the same, and that's wonderful. It's when people try to turn us all into robots and into something that can be replicated one after the other, which is really what the schooling systems that we've all lived under have actually done. Once we begun to become confident with what we're capable of doing and exploring and looking at it from a different angle, each of us, it also helps us, with the other person can see the blind spots that we as an individual have, then they can help us, get around those blocks that stop us from achieving the goals that we have, which is why I'm excited about the journey that we're on now. The film is an exciting project to be working on, but the paintings is now becoming an exciting, because I'm getting visualizations of these paintings already in my head, what's going to go on them, and just the fun of actually, the methods we're going to use to try and achieve that. Again, when we were talking earlier on, you were talking about the artist method that we might be using. And I mentioned this in one of the other shows. I went to see a lady called Janet Pierce, and she produced a nice, large, small in your sense, artwork, which I filmed over a 10-minute period. And she demonstrated the process she'd done, and she turned it into a landscape with water, lakes, and all sorts of things. It took her 10 minutes to do, and she said, "That's 400 quid.
That's it. It's not the time. It's the who.
It's the
yeah. What. Actually, what's interesting, you were talking about a minute ago, you were saying, a lot of things are possible.
Yeah.
But the other word that's normally associated with that is, but how probable. And you're going, we want to increase the probability of things happening, as opposed to they are possible. They're not impossible. Yeah. But, they're still don't exist, and we got to increase the probability, and actually not even the probability, it's the 100% probability that they do exist and come into existence, and that likelihood, and that's where the effort is. Most of the time we give the weight to the probability of it not happening, and therefore don't start, don't do the bit of effort. I mean, all I might end up with is 52, 7 foot, blank, sort of paintings. Well, to me, but that is actually already the achievement. It's then you're saying that's the blank one there, but then it's capable of holding and housing anything and everything that will ever exist as an image on it. We just haven't put it on it. And we can put it on it by different tech and media. We can walk around the virtual gallery that there's the spots and the locations, but the actual thing that exists on it exists only in virtual space. We don't even know how we're going to achieve it, and it doesn't matter. It's more the fact we're making things more real. And now each step of the way it's 100%. And what finished is, we haven't defined. And it doesn't matter. And it's not that the painting is not the painting. The painting is actually the film. Yeah. We start separating the pieces. In our world, we're using one. We're blending. We're not saying this is an art installation. No, this is the art installation of the storyboard and of our feature film. It's actually, when we make this other part more real from this part, then you don't even know that avatar is this individual and actor. We can't wait to see it made real, us made real. Every step of the way is a new reality anyway. It's not to leave it in the drawer. And what we're doing is we're going to bring that story out of the drawer in so many different ways. We're telling the story of the story on storyboard, on installation, on animatic, on just sitting in a coffee shop, and just making it real in people's minds by and that's what I want to do. I give little snippets of the past and what it can be, and who's the actor and who could it be and where it might be shot. And until it's done and dusted and totally real, the amount of what it can be is 100 times more than what it will be.
Mm. Well, I mean, one of the things that you were talking about, making something into a reality, it existed 5 years ago because the idea originated in your mind with the concept of the 52 Jokers and the canvas, because that was something you were talking about back then. And the fact that it's still here 5 years later, and you're now getting the wood, means that it was meant to be in existence, because you've manifested it from that period of time. And again, I think it's the same with everything that we're all doing. We're each manifesting ideas and trying to make them become real. Okay, but they existed beforehand because we perceived them. I mean, I'm in the process at the moment of visualizing in my head and constructing a new shed in the garden, and it's becoming quite a strong sort of sense of what it is that I will be constructing that as well. But I think that's when we come back to this collaboration. One of the things that's really important is that although you can't see part of the picture and I might not see another part, by bringing those two together and 3 or 4 people together to do this, you mentioned Willie there, that basically, well, they're all the parts that need to be put together so it does become real. And that's something that I think is really, really important about the kind of collaborative process that is really important, because we've been allowed to see how our contribution could make that thing become real, and that we don't have to have the whole picture individually. It's just that we know that if we do this part, the other person will be able to finish that bit off and make it what we wanted to, but couldn't quite see how to get there. And I think that's what I've heard from you, what you're saying, is that you're one element that's needed, and you needed the other elements to bring it into reality. And now we've got a team of people that are going to be able to achieve that goal. And there are other elements of other people that we're working with, such as Alan, who we may not at this point think how might be involved, but because we have the conversation with him, he'll suddenly see how his contribution could be important to what's going on. I'm just going to end that. There's somebody calling me at this point. So those are really important aspects of where we're going. So the collaboration is the key point of where we're going.
And it always has been. That's the strange thing. A film is full of people doing their functions, but collaborating. They're collaborating with their function, but giving of themselves and their skill to make themselves part of the story of the film. you know, of the film creation and making the story real. And there's no separate piece here. There's no I in any of this at all, because I can't, there's too many roles that any particular I couldn't do it alone. It has to be collaborative. There has to be a we. It has to be aligned. There can be showrunners, but at the same time, it's the story of the story, and each individual story within that gets them to make it their own. They want to be part of it, and that's the journey we're going on. We're making it the minimum it can be, so the story of any individual involved has a different weighting and commitment and passion, as opposed to their function.
Well, I know that throughout most of my life in the work I've been doing, I've been wanting to get to this kind of point where I've had that kind of collaboration with other people that has been creative, and not just felt as though I was being exploited through the processes that we were doing. I mean, I've been watching I've been getting a few Beatles albums recently, and on YouTube, I've been watching some of their processes that they were going through when they were in the studio, and also when they were outside the studio, individually trying to pull things together and to work things out. And what I'm enjoying is the fact that I can see the processes that we're going through very, very much similar to those processes that they did, and yet they were just young men. They at an early age. The interesting thing is that I think the reason why so many people back in the early 60s were able to learn to play the guitar was because and play the drums was because they had no work. It would have been unemployment. So they basically got something that they learned, they could put hours and hours and hours of practice in before they actually generated any income from it. And because they'd had the time to do that, it was only when they then collaborated as a group they were able to produce the kind of material they did. And yet not all of the material was turned out to be great. I mean, one of the stories I heard recently was that they got to a certain point where they had about £2 million in their bank, and they were basically being told if they didn't set up a company, they would actually lose it all to the tax man. We talked about that, and they had a song called "The Tax Man," which I thought was brilliant. And they're talking about, you could take it all from you or everything from you, but we're going to tax you if you're going to walk, if you're going to see, or whatever. Absolutely brilliant. But they were basically being threatened that if they didn't set up a company, they ended up setting up Apple Corporation. And then they did the White Album. Even the producers on that, what's his name, Martin, was basically saying, this isn't their best work. Why are they doing it? They just wanted to knock it out quickly because they knew they needed to do something. Otherwise, they were going to lose all their income at this point. But it was one of the hardest products that they produced from what I've been reading and listening to. Excuse me. That it then started, because it became money orientated, they started to lose their kind of creative spark, and the joys of what they were doing were suddenly being taken away from them. And I think that's why they suddenly got into difficulties at that point.
Now, I just said, for some unknown reason, the title of our new feature, Any Which Way But Out. And when people go look at it and see it and all the rest of them, based on what it's based on for that particular story, they'll understand the story. But just a sentence based on what we were just talking about a couple of minutes ago, in the sense of most people are stuck in the silos of their lives and there is no out. They can't break away. It's any which way but out. They can't get out of this, of this pure journey of 60 years of this, 30 years of work, eat, drink, sleep, do again. The majority are in that space. And then a couple, the minority are the influences, the breakout, the ones that became the multimillionaires, the ones that went off and were the influencers and the innovators. But the majority, it's any which way but out. Yeah. There has to be the machine, the grind, the rat race. That's exactly as we said. Everybody can't be the top of the pyramid. So the journey is, if you can be that person to break beyond your comfort zone and break out of that silo, then you've achieved. And that's it. And that's my journey my whole journey of my life on an accountancy was any which way but out. It took a long, long time to break that cycle, and now I'm out. At the out is actually back to me. To get out to be, which was really to take away the avatar clothes of accountant and go put on the ones of creator of or whoever you want to be on whatever day of the week. It's not to be beholden to others to decide who you are. So I'm out.
Yeah, and there's something interesting in that because it's not for selfish reasons that you're doing what you're doing. I mean, there is a kind of well-being sort of mental thing that's there, psychological. Um, but it's if it was selfish, it would be trying to grab everything for oneself, which is what we see some of the billionaires appearing to do. But I kind of get the idea that for as much as they have managed to make their billions, they've just created more traps and walls for themselves to wrap around them. That they although they seem to have millions of people working for them, it's a kind of an odd concept for them because they don't necessarily have the relationship with them. They're still trapped within their world, if that makes sense. And some of them eventually want to break out from that because they're not achieving the goals that they would like to have done. So I think this is something that's really important as a message to give people, is that we can, if we know we have responsibilities, we're not trying to get away from those responsibilities, but we also have got to a point where there is we've realized that having a certain sense of freedom is not about money. It's about being creative, but it's about being co-creative with other people and enjoying that social activity where you're not the boss of somebody. You're not lording it over somebody. You're finding ways to work with another person that allows them to be lifted to their full potential and for them to realize what they would like to do. And that's that collaborative process, which I know that I've been looking for a long, long time. And it's only really in the last 5 years that we've been working together that I've had that sense of satisfaction that we're doing something that, that is leading me along that journey that I want to, which mirrors your journey. And I think that's an important thing as well. When we do get, I mean, one of the lovely things at the moment is we are getting successes with the way that the two films that we've made so far are winning little awards. And we were looking at the cost of that, but it really doesn't really matter that way. But we've been able to celebrate together when we've won something that we've achieved through that collaboration. And that's more important. It's having joint memories with other people. Because if you go off on your own and become the one that's at the top, you're not really celebrating with everybody else because you might end up burning bridges with everybody else just to be able to get that lofty height that may not be really of anything of importance. This is the valuable stuff because we can share this stuff with other people and the memories that we have with other people. And it's that journey together that I think becomes, really important. It's about building relationships. And at the end of the day, that's what this is, because to accomplish the goals that we've set out, whether it's film wise or whether it's those paintings that you're talking about, it's about the relationships that we develop with other people. And the proof of the pudding there is that with the people that we've worked with so far, they want to come back and collaborate with us again. And will do constantly because we respect them as human beings.
That's it. The freedom to do. That's it. The freedom to be and the freedom to go do more. It's not free to do, but it's to give freely of your time to it's not that every sentence is a charge or that's what I'm finding. Most time you can't get to talk to people, you can't get to ask a question because the time is so locked down that's where most people are stuck. If only someone was a little bit more accessible, then they can get an answer that's enough to point them in the right direction. That didn't really cost. It was I want to be free to have conversations. I want to be free to do, but I don't want to be seen to be free, and therefore, you can, that use then comes in. It's givers and takers. That's our weird. But the freedom, we're trying to get to a point in our time where we have the freedom to do.
Yeah. Well, look, I think we're coming to the end of this one, which I think is the exploration of how to build relationships for co-creation is really important, and to realize how that as we've got we've had to do a long journey of life where we've had to work for other people to understand what it really means to be able to do to do the stuff that you're doing that you really enjoy, and that the purpose is to build those relationships and those memories, which become a lifelong activity, which I think is really important. Especially, I mean, we've both got wives. We've both, we've got people that we've worked with for the guts of our life, and they've stayed with us. And those are the relationships we want to build with other people as well as a community. And I think that that's really important. So I think the message really of this episode is that think big. If it's 10-foot frames, well, think that way. And if it come down to 7-foot frames by 4, because that's part of the collaboration process, it's part of the learning curve that you go on, and that's also good. Nothing's lost. I think that's the other thing. So we can incorporate within what we're now doing all the stuff that we've encountered in the past and put it into practice. And I think that's the lovely thing about what we're doing now. All those years of experience that I've had, I know the ones that you've had, they're allowing us to do what we're now able to do now. We just have to be persistent and keep on going and not give up. And that's really the message. And I think that's the message to other people out there as well. Don't give up. Keep on going. There's value yourself, especially if other people don't seem to value you, and don't listen to those people that don't value you, because your opinions, based on the experiences you have, are important and should be valued, and you should value them yourself, and you will get the recognition that you deserve as you go along, which I think, and it's not about becoming rich, it's about creating the milestones that you can see that your life was well worth it and it had a sense of purpose. I think that's really what it's all about. So thank you very much for listening to the show. Please like, subscribe, and whatever people want to do on these new media, social media type things. And that's it for me, George. And over to you, Garvin, for the last word.
No, the last word. The never last word with me. But it comes back to the same thing. I've said it on many a podcast before. It's strange enough. It's, you may not find, you might try 9 times and you don't find the right person. Don't give up. Keep on trying, keep on going, because your tribe is out there. And it's most of the time, and for years of my life, I was always trying to asking the wrong person the wrong thing and got the answer that you could only expect, which was a no. But they were never going to be your customer. They were never going to be your friend. Therefore, why would you ever feel rejected by that if you knew that beforehand? That wasn't a rejection. That was just the wrong person at the wrong time in the wrong place with the wrong question. Keep on asking, keep on meeting people, keep on greeting. That's your Dale Carnegie. Go out, make friends, influence people, keep reaching out, keep on asking. You will find your tribe. And if you don't, it doesn't matter. You'll be a lone Indian. Excuse the French and all the rest of it. But that's okay too, because you're out there and you're doing your thing. You're not locked inside. Nothing's going to happen in a locked room.
Thanks a lot. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.